July is in our rearview mirror, and we are here to talk about the top new to us games that we played this last month.
Yeah, we played like 30 games.
And so I want to say it was like 31.
Oh, more than that, yeah. And what's frustrating is a lot of them were like new prototypes, games that aren't released yet, previews that we got to see. And so whilst we're going to be talking about them, some of them don't quite count as being in our top 5. And so we have a long list of honorable mentions this week.
We actually had to spend some extra time talking about the structure of this video so that it was sustainable over time, but also because there's a lot of moving parts. So what we decided that we're going to do is we're going to first talk about some texture edition. So a texture edition is probably a game that we've mentioned before, but we have a new take on it or some new context, and we wanted to kind of give that textural update. The next category there are a couple of games that are either pre-release or Kickstarter, and we didn't get complete, robust plays of them to be able to really get a feel beyond just enjoying them and having some high-level anticipation notes. And so we'll be mentioning those, and then we're going to go into like the meat and potatoes, which is the honorable mentions, so the ones that didn't quite make it to our top 5 list, but were still games that we really wanted to talk about for some reason.
I'm thinking we need to like talk with Robin from Scratch It Off to get some little intro tunes and skits
with music
for each section.
Dun-dun-dun. July is in our rearview mirror. Wait, no, it can't be specific to July. It has to be like, okay, ready?
Here's some texture for your collection.
This is a no from me. This is a no. No, I think
it has to have jazz hands.
No, it does have to have jazz hands.
Yeah.
It has to be like, Robin, how do you do this?
Help us.
Okay, all I can think of is great collection. Don't you agree? Scratch it off, board games. Well, it's top 50.
It's for the specific sections. So
I know.
So the first one
for the
is
first section?
texture.
Okay. It is time for some texture. What's that mean? Let me lecture about the dynamics of the game that got our list because they gave us some fame. I don't really know what I'm doing there. Anyways, so the texture chat. This is when we've had a new experience or interaction with the game and we just want to add a little bit more texture to something that we shared before. And the first game we want to put in that category is Phase Swamp.
Now, we have a video on this on our channel from early this month, so it's very recent if you want to see our full review on this.
We had the opportunity to play this with Levi from Board with Levi. She came over, she did a great series where she's traveling around the country to different people who are going to teach her games that are on her shelf of shame. So we were able to teach her this one. We also played a couple of other games together, which were great. But we've now played this at 2 players, 3 players, and 4 players. So our first play was at 4, then we played 2, and now 3.
So what did you think about play count?
I think my favorite is 3 players. I go back and forth because before we were even talking about this, I was thinking, is it 2 players, is it 3 players? And they're different sides of the board. I think what I like about the 3-player situation is that you have a little bit more flexibility before there starts to become a cost for everything, where on the 2-player it just immediately starts hitting a monogame, meaning that you have to start paying to put workers places. And with 4 players, it starts to get a little bit claustrophobic in there. So 3 players is really lovely.
So 2 players does have a nice snappier feel to it, in my opinion. However, my favorite thing about this game is the player interaction and how it's a good variety. There's not much negative player interaction. It's much more complex than that. And I feel like you lose some of that when you drop below 3 players. But equally, I don't think you get that much more going from 3 to 4. And so that's why 3 is the sweet spot for me.
Yeah, okay. I would agree with this. Awesome. Consensus was reached. Now let's move along. Okay, our next texture update.
Moon Colony Bloodbath. So this is one of my favorite games. This is like a top 2 contender.
So crazy to me.
Yeah. So if you follow some short form, this was a contentious time. The first time we played this, we played it 2 times in one sitting.
Contentious for you. Let's be specific.
Needless to say, I hated this game the first time we played it. Then the second time I was like, I quite like it. And then every time we played it since, it's like, I like it a bit more. I like it a bit more. And some small part of that is the joy of seeing someone get so boastful about, I'm quite good at this game. What are you talking about? Only to see them be humbled moments later, and you to be enjoying how modest a game you've played, to have the stability of your foundation, and watch everyone around you just crumble slowly.
This game is so ruthless. The texture edition for us this past month was that we played with non-gamer friends.
Yes.
And so they had such a good time. I think the game mastering, we've talked before about in this game that one of the best parts of it is that it allows the players to have personality as well. So when you're GMing, it's really fun to bring some flavor if you're the one that's kind of centrally owning all of the different components. But you actually jammed that game, and it was really, really delightful.
Yeah. In video games, we talk about having a skill ceiling and a skill floor, and that kind of represents the range of skill and strategy you can bring. And what I really like about some board games, specifically Moon Colony, is it has a high skill ceiling in that you can get really good at the game, you can learn it, you can play it very well, but it also has a low skill floor. And what we learned this month is that it was quite easy to introduce newcomers to the hobby who, it wasn't their first game by any means, but they definitely, like, this would be considered fairly heavy for them, and they really enjoyed it. They had a good time, they had a good experience, and it didn't drag us down in terms of the kind of game we could play, because whilst there's a lot of, like, engagement around the table, there's not that much direct player interaction.
Yeah.
And yeah, I found it to be quite fun.
This game is very emotionally triggering for people because I think in your first play it's hard not to be a little bit of a fatalist because it's just so aggressive.
Yeah.
But I find that the more fun you can have with it, the more open you are, the less personalized you make things, the happier you're going to be playing this game. But it doesn't, like, just because you've personalized something on the first play, it doesn't mean anything about you as a person. Ironically enough, it's just that some games are more emotionally affecting or emotionally, I don't want to say manipulative because it's not emotionally, but they have higher emotional impact, and this game has a really high emotional impact. And so I find that, like, as we've been playing it more and more, the more challenging parts of the emotional impact are dampening down, and there's more and more space to just let loose and have a lot of fun with it, which not everybody can do right out of the gate.
Yeah. So we reviewed this game before we started our YouTube channel, and so if you want to see more content on this, you're going to have to let us know in the comments, and we will...
if we should backtrack on that. But there goes Moon Colony.
That's Moon Colony. Honorable mention number 2.
So the last texture mention is Yonder. This was my top game of last month. So if you want to see our like top 10 of the, I think it was 50 games in
50
June,
games.
right?
It was my number 3 and your number 1.
Yeah, then go and watch that. But I wanted to add that we played this now at 2 players and at 4 players. And we played with Brad and Kate Games, and it was a meaner game. It was a meaner game at 4 players. I think there's one of the core components of this game is that you're building your own individual village, and then there are the worker placement slots on the city board itself. And because of what other people are doing, there's just so much more opportunity to kind of like not hate draft, but like hate worker placement.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more leverage you can get out of other people's villages because the card worker spots tend to be just a little bit more lucrative than the city. And so it just incentivizes people to go visit and mess with your game a little more.
I found this game a little unfair, honestly, at 4, mostly because you're limited on the kind of actions you can do in a turn, and so if you're building, you can't then also place on that, and because there are so many players at the table, but there is no way for you to defend a building that you just made if it has a worker slot on it that you need, and turn order, it really just screws you in this game. And so, like, unlike Fair Swamp earlier, whilst I do like some of the minor player interaction details, I prefer this game at 2 myself. What about you?
I really liked it at 2. That being said, we played it for the first time in like the middle of the night. You'll see this trend tends to happen with us where we'll be like, we can learn a game now. It's only 9 p.m. And then we are like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. How are we still playing this? So this game I enjoyed at 2 players. I think I also would enjoy it at 4. It's just that we've played it at 2 for the first time when we were learning it for the first time. Yeah. And then 4 where 2 of us knew it, but had only played it once, and 2 of us did not know it. And so it's just been imbalanced every single time that we've played it.
Yeah, we played this with Brad and Kate, and they picked it up pretty quickly.
But that being said, I still really enjoyed the game with them.
Very good.
So that is Yonder, and we are going to be doing more Yonder-specific content soon. So if you want that, stick around. Okay. Which, speaking of, before we go on to the other, honorable mentions and our top 5, liking, commenting, subscribing makes a huge difference for us. And not only just a difference in morale, which we often talk about because we read every single comment, and, both of us, it's really meaningful to actually have a 2-way conversation or a multi-way conversation, but also it's been life-changing. Some of the opportunities in building community, in meeting people, in feeling more connected has been really life-changing. So every ounce of support you guys give us is really meaningful.
And whilst we've been making content quite well for short form, we're still quite new to YouTube, and so it really helps when we have feedback, positive or neutral, around like...
Not negative, no.
Oh, no negative comments, please.
No. But constructive criticism. You don't have to agree with our opinions, and positive, Yeah,
so thank you for anyone who does take the time to like comment, like, or subscribe.
All right, let's move on to our upcoming games.
Yeah, these are games that we either got an early preview of, we currently have an early access version of, and so these are games that aren't quite ready to buy just yet, but they're games that we're super excited for and or will be making content on.
These are games that are coming up. Who knows, maybe they'll fill your cup. I think it's best if I keep it short.
Yeah, no. I think she would be proud of that one. Yeah.
Robin, are you proud of me?
Okay. Okay. Which one are we gonna do first?
That one.
So next up was a game that was really meaningful to the Hachette team when they demoed it to us at Leeds Board Game Convention, and that is Dwarves of Aquilon. And we honestly, I was a little bit skeptical of this one. I was like drawn into it by the vibe, the art style. It felt very like Lord of the Rings dwarves style to me. However, when
There's also just a lot of dwarf games out right
yeah,
now.
but when they opened the box, there's lots of pop outs. There was a little structure being made, and I'm like, oh, there's like gimmicky components. And then we sat down and played, and oh my, this is both so satisfying and so unique. I don't think I've played a game quite like this. The game that comes closest to me is like, if you think of like Splendor, but more competitive and more strategic, and not just like a race for like strategy. Like there was so much more depth to the strategy here. And then like they taught us the game so well. Like the core mechanic was so much fun. I was like, oh, this is a fun game. And then they introduced this other layer
layers of complexity
of like these heroes that you recruit into your like scoring system, and that like there are really fun different ways to score. And if
Hold on, time out, because I think we need to bring everyone up to speed on like the core of
yeah,
the game.
I'm sorry, I'm rushing ahead because I'm just
so excited
I
about
was so
this.
pleasantly surprised by this.
Yeah, and we will, by the way, we're going to be doing a full playthrough because we only got a quick demo, which is why it didn't make us to our, like even from the demo, it probably could have made it to a top 5, but it just didn't feel fair since we didn't fully play it through.
Yes.
But the core function of how this game works is that it's a betting game, an auctioning game, and set collection game. So there are different factions which have different cards. Each individual faction has a different scoring mechanic, and then in order to get cards, you are placing these coins face down these 3 different marketplaces to be the first one to be able to take the card. But you can also upgrade those coins into higher coins,
Yes.
so everyone starts with the same 0 through 5.
And that is where the magic starts. Like you're auctioning with the coins, like bidding for coins, but you can then upgrade your coins based
into more powerful
based on how you
base
play.
numbers.
And you can be upgrading by playing more strategically than your opponent. So whilst they might be like taking some of the really appealing cards in the first round, you could be outplaying them. So by the point of like the second or third age, you have so many higher value coins than they do that you can just win every single bid. So you can be the first to select a card into your tableau.
Yeah.
And oh, I love games where you can introduce your own asymmetry through your own strategy.
We'll be able to speak about it more eloquently after we've done our full playthrough ourselves, so expect that soon. But the other thing I just wanted to mention is that the artwork is all from a pretty well-known comic, and so you might even recognize some of it. But we're really excited to play this. We feel so honored to have been lent this copy to be able to play it through between now and August and hopefully give some more thoughts on it. But I can understand why this was such a meaningful game for them, because it is a powerful thing.
Yeah, awesome. So you'll be seeing more from this soon.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the next game that's in our collection is not with us physically at the moment, and that is Elementary, which of course is going to have very recognizable Sundara artwork, the artist behind Flamecraft as well.
I'm also a bit envious because I didn't get to play this. And like, whilst it looked interesting to me, I was like, it looks interesting, but the vibe's like not quite in my wheelhouse. And then I saw them playing and some of the core mechanics, like, really I like a bit of bluffing, a little bit of like strategy around the table.
It's very thematically consistent. Manny and Sundara are such a dream team, and so I completely understand why this game immediately caught my eye. But we were very fortunate enough, or I was very fortunate enough, to be able to play with a wonderful group of people. And I'll just kind of lightly overview the game, which is currently live on Kickstarter, I believe. So in this game, you have your own private selection of dice. There is a public set of dice, and then there's all these like adorable little lunch items in the middle, and you are trying to build a portfolio of friends, so a tableau. And you are also trying to gather those cards by bluffing. So you roll your dice, the collective dice are rolled, and then you kind of go around in a circle where someone says, like, I think there are 3 sandwiches among all of us. And then you have to keep getting higher and higher. And unless you bet that there's more, you can't grab a card. So as long as you keep betting, you're able to keep drafting cards. And then at one point, someone either has to bet or call someone's bluff and be like, no, I don't think you have that. And you have to remember, this is elementary school. So I don't think you have that at all. And then everybody has to take sides, which was the cutest part of like, I think he is lying. I think he's not lying. It was adorable.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what I heard is that there are 2 teams. No matter how many people are playing, you have to take sides on this is I agree or I don't agree. So there are like 2 factions.
It was so sweet.
And it sounds like very thematic in terms of like playground, like arguments and disputes.
It is. And after that point, it gets revealed either among all of the dice, including the collective ones, there are 13 sandwiches or there aren't 13 sandwiches. And then the person who ends up being wrong loses things. And if you're on the side of justice, then not only do you gain the person who accused them gained dice, but also anyone who sided with them also gets a dice.
Yeah.
And then you use those dice in order to pay the card cost to put something in your friend portfolio. So the art is amazing. The mechanics of the game are really clever. I actually don't think I've played a game like it. Like, it's really unique.
Yeah, it's funny, but both of these games, Dwarves of Aquilon and this one, so unique.
Yeah, I really, really liked it. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited to hopefully play it again sometime soon. I'm curious about how it plays at 2 players because I did see that it is, I think, 1 to 5 players, but we played it at the full player count. So that was a good experience because there's a lot of taking sides and things. And I can't imagine it will be too different at 2 players, but I would imagine there has to be a variant for 2 players with the whole bluffing mechanic or betting mechanic. It's not bluffing because you might not be bluffing. You're betting, actually. So that's elementary. And I'm sure that once we play through it more, it will end up in our conversations in the future.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to honorable mentions. I feel like we're still we're so much honorable mentions, but you know what? We're gonna rock and roll with it.
These are just like leftover games that we really want to shout out this month that didn't quite make it into our top 5. They might be games we played before, or they might also be new games this month. So we'll just cover each one quite quickly before we then dive into our top 5 of the month each.
So one of my honorable mentions was Loof, which is one of the trio from Wolfhorn games.
Yeah.
And so there's Medieval Inns, Goblin Laundromat, and Loaf, which were really popular, I believe, at Essen last year. And they did a little like pop-up at UKGE this year. We already had Medieval Inns, but we did not get Loaf, and I really regretted it. We also have Goblin Laundromat. Not a huge fan of Goblin Laundromat, but I really loved Loaf.
Like Medieval Inns is like a top like pocket game for us that we love carrying out to cafes.
So in Loaf, you are a baker and you are trying to be the laziest worker without getting fired. So it's a semi-cooperative game where every single round you have a collective sum that everybody playing has to meet. And there's an average, a player average of how much you have to contribute. And everyone in their own individual hand has cards numbered 0 to 11. Endgame scoring is if you don't get fired by the end of the game, whatever cards are left in your hand are also summed up, and that is your end score. So you're trying to underachieve so that you don't have to contribute your higher cards, so you have those for scoring at the end, while also not ending up getting fired, because every time you piss off your boss, bad things happen to the laziest employee, and bad things collectively happen sometimes to everybody else. So this game has a lot of like chaotic player interaction.
Yeah. So this is one of those games where like it definitely lies on its mechanics and the underlying like system. It's not just like a social deduction game, for example, but it seems like it's definitely elevated and refined by people at the table and the discussion that goes on and the bits that happen in between rounds. And so I've only played this once, but you got to play it again this weekend at Leeds Board Game Convention with some of our friends. Like, how did the experience change based on the people at the table?
So to be fair, the first time we played it, we were kind of rushing through, and I think we even had to stop before the game fully ended. But I think what's really delightful about this is you have the first effect of if you piss off the boss, the person who plays the lowest card gets penalized. If you achieve and make the boss happy, the person with the highest card gets something. But then there's another effect based on whether or not you pissed off the boss. So some of it is that you can play with incentive. So you're looking around and you're like, okay, well, the effect is going to kill only that person because that's the only person who's actually in a higher score. So that person's incentive is to succeed. And so they're probably going to pull higher, which means that I can pull lower. So as you said, there is social deduction. So playing with people who kind of were able to see the underlying mechanics of what people's vibe and incentive would be, I think really added a lot of value. Whereas I think the first time we were playing, we were so focused on like, how do you actually play the game, that I don't know that we could sink into the enjoyment of that process as much.
Awesome.
So that's Loaf.
So the next game, the only reason it isn't making my top 5 is because it's really not quite new to us at this point. We've played it quite a lot over the past couple of months. And this month it's mostly been about introducing it to new people because of like how solid it is in our collection. And that is Tin and Og. This was one of our top games that we walked away with at UKGE. And it has been so much fun to share with people this month, especially our friends who like some of the games that we compare it to. Like Castle Combos always comes to mind because of the kind of strategy that you're implementing, the kind of tableau-based scoring that you're going for. Only there's a bit more depth in this, a bit more player interaction. and it's a little bit more crunchy just in terms of like the kind of like planning you're doing, but it is still like a medium to lightweight game, and so it's really fun to pull out as like a warm-up game, or really fun to play asynchronously on BGA. Like both versions of the game are quite fun.
This one, you are sending storytellers into the other world. So everyone has these 3 kind of workers or meeples, and they all have different instruments on them because storytellers were usually musicians, bards, right? And so you're sending them into the other world, placing them between different cards, and so you'll have an option of what you pull back. So in the first round, everyone's just going around and placing their storytellers until everyone has placed 3, and then you have the saga round where the storytellers are returning home, and so you're drafting cards, and sometimes another person might take the card you were going for, and you're playing that into a sequential, or not sequential, but you're playing it left to right most of the time into a top, middle, and bottom row, which each have different scoring criteria. So it's very puzzly, it's very familiar, but I think it has a little bit more depth. So with Castle Combo, everything is just individually on those cards, and it's very like what you're doing strategically is what's on the tin, right? Like it tells you it wants villager cards, great. But with some of this, you can be planning to move cards later around, or, you know, kind of holding out hope that something's going to come up in the future, like Other Worlds, because you play this over the course of 5 rounds.
Yes.
5 rounds. So there's just a lot of depth in Tir na Nog, isn't there?
Yeah, and like the player interaction just a bit more like fleshed out.
Yeah, and the artwork is beautiful.
Awesome. And so that's Tir na Nog.
So the next one is Under the Wire. We literally just played this 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, like you literally just taught this to me like 30 minutes ago, although you played it earlier this month.
I learned it from Reese, and Reese from Chance Encounters, and Tussie Mussy is the game we're talking about. So he had the wallet version. This was the only version I could actually find here, which is their new box version with all the expansions. I think I mildly prefer it as a wallet, to be honest, because it's something you can slip in your pocket, but I am very grateful to have the complete collection. Yeah. So Tussie Mussy, you might recognize Elizabeth Hargrave's name because she's the artist behind Wingspan with that beautiful, beautiful artwork. And in this game, it has the kind of original intention of flower giving behind it. So every single turn, you're drawing 2 cards if you're the offerer, and you are offering to the person either next to you if it's a multiplayer game or across from you in a 2-player game. One of them is face up, one of them is face down, and that person has to decide which one and pull it back toward them. And you keep doing that until you each have 4 cards, then you score them, and you do this 3 times. So it's this like fun little game because there's different scoring criteria on the cards. There's different reasons you might want to do something. You have to think about which one you want to bait someone with. There's just a lot of there is a lot of depth in this game, or complexity in this game, even though it's just so simple. And I love games that have a really simple decision or simple thing to keep track of, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a puzzly nature.
Yeah, I think I really like games where they feel like a concentration of something. Like Gnar feels like you've condensed engine building down into as tight a package as you really can without sacrificing like the satisfaction of engine building and the variety you get there. Rebirth feels like you're contracting like area control down, though we have played other games this month that actually do a similar thing, which I think we're going to be mentioning in a bit. And now Tussie Mussy feels like, I don't even know what to compare it to, but it does feel so dense and tight, and like based on the packaging and the vibe and the art style, it's usually something that I'd be like, I'll play it if you like, but it's not drawing me in. This was so fun and quick and snappy, and like that quick snappiness, the fact that we could pull it out and play it in 5 minutes was a part of what I enjoyed so much.
Yes. Absolutely. So that's Tussie Mussy, and you will probably be seeing us play this at conventions.
Yeah. Or if you just see us out in the wild.
Like a Pokemon.
Yeah. Okay, now the last one is a game that we've had in our collection for quite a while, but it's really hard to get to the table because the best version of it is, in my opinion at least, played with larger groups of people. And this is Panorama. Now this is a collaborative tableau builder where you are building 2 tableaus, one to your left and one to your right with your 2 neighbors. And so your score at the end of the game is the combined score for both of them. And so you're kind of forced to like pick and choose. I have an opportunity to score bonus points in this one, but that teammate to the left of mine is also doing well in their other tableaus. So I might want to sacrifice points here to support the tableau to the right. And so that strategy alone is quite interesting, but you might also not be able to place where you want to. And so you're forced to kind of be continuing to support one of your tableaus. There's a lot more thinking and strategy in this. And like we just said in the previous one, like it's being condensed down to one small decision that you're making each turn that has quite a lot of impact. And so, yeah, any other thoughts on this, Madeline?
This is just part of a larger, I think, pick and pass train. So we've mentioned before that we tend to get, and not even purposefully sometimes, we tend to get on these like kicks. So last month, I think the genre of game we were most on was worker placement. Like worker placement, worker placement, worker placement. as in June.
Yeah.
In July, I feel like it's been pick and pass.
Yeah.
Pick and pass, pick and pass, pick and pass. So this is a pick and pass game. There are more pick and passes that we're going to talk about, but pick and pass, pick and pass. And I don't like, to some degree, with the worker placement, I think there was a little bit of active pursuit in June because we were enjoying the style of gameplay. With this one, with pick and pass, I do feel like it's kind of just happened to us.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of fell in our lap. And I think it started with the game that's going to come up very quickly in our top 5 rankings. I don't want to spoil it just yet,
Yes.
but you'll see that coming up soon.
Yeah. So that is all of the honorable mentions, which means that we're on to the core of the video, which is our top 5 new to us games. So these are new for us to play. We would play them every day. That is why they're on our top 5. So we'll see if with you they jive. That wasn't horrible, but I can't say I like myself more after that. All right, so my number 5 I think is first. So my number 5 is Wondrous Creatures. So this game I hunted down. I did a whole video on hunting it down on social media. Finally got it, unboxed it.
Especially when it was so hard to get hold of in the UK.
Yeah, unboxed it. Was so excited for myself. And then it sat, and it sat, and it sat, and it sat.
For about 8 months.
And it sat. Wondrous Creatures is technically an engine building game. It's a tableau builder. And you know, I wonder how this game would have affected you if we'd played it earlier in our journey. But for me, it was a top 5. One, because I love the artwork in this game. I love the aesthetics in this game. I love the art style in this game. So visually, it's already a big yes from me. The other thing is, it's a little bit... So in the game, you've got a hand of cards, there's central marketplaces, you've got resources you're trying to manage, you're trying to build your tableau. There are different phases, and so each part of your tableau can kind of be affected by those different phases. There's action chaining that you can do. It's a very action chainy game, and I tend to really love action chaining games and engine building games, but especially action chaining because I'm very, very good at action chaining.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed it because I picked it up quite quickly. You had a very frustrating first play.
Yeah, I both had a frustrating first play. And if I'm honest, like, because this was sitting in our collection for so long, and we know that it had traits that we really like in games, it was being put on this really tall pedestal, like, oh, that's going to be a top game for us. Oh, that is like us to a T, that has so many mechanics that we like. And so it was being hyped and hyped and hyped in my brain, and also based on other people's impressions, and the laundry list of like mechanics that appeal to us. And so I think there was just like too high of an expectation. So that by the time we came out to play it, when there was frustration, it really sucked and I felt really disappointed. And so like, if I was to just do TLDR, I did like this game. It was nice for me. I enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed it playing it digitally, to be honest.
We then played it on BGA afterwards.
So that like clarified some of the frustrations I had. That like yeah, some of it was like the learning experience and having to manage a few different things that I didn't want to have to manage all at once.
So what I know about us when we play is that oftentimes Ollie will say that I win everything, but actually what's happening is that I tend to pick up and retain information about a game on a first play much more easily than you do.
Yeah.
And this game has a lot of like moving parts.
Yeah. So Madeline is quicker at learning games. You're much better action chaining than me. And when there's like some requirement for like remembering things, like and holding things in your brain in like short-term memory, you're also much stronger at that. And I think that this to a T required quite a bit of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I think that's some of why, as in like, I agree that those are some of my strengths. So it's not really about better than, but those are some of my strengths. And as a result, I think this game was really well suited to me. And so I know that how both of us feel is when the other person's like really hitting their stride while you're just kind of figuring things out. It does affect the game, like, because then it ends up just feeling like you're being like completely dogpiled on and there's just no way to move back. I felt so bad for Brad while we were playing Yonder because it was just ruthless. But he is a good champ. He's a great person to play with. But I think that's also part of why we had such a like mixed experience there. But I personally really liked this game. I really loved the different complexities. So there's a few different like micro decisions you can make. And I think if you're a very perceptive person, so if you're like, okay, if I choose that award, that will be like just the thing I need. Because I think that was something about this game. And actually really it's a little bit to our number 1 pick later. But if you notice the like one thing that would just tip that action chaining from good to excellent, if you're someone who's really perceptive and can really take in the full scope of something, you're gonna like this game.
Yeah.
Because there was like a, oh my god, I can do that thing. And I did feel that in our number one game as well, which we'll talk about later.
I'll talk more about some of my experiences in a similar note with our later games.
So I think we'll probably come back to some more nuance in this as well, because I'm very curious with our first game being a very action chainy game and this one being action chainy, what was different for you, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have a drastic 180 like I did with Moon Colony, but I do see my opinion of this game improving if we get a few more players in.
Yeah.
I'm especially curious about if the expansion changes much or if it just adds to it. Because if it changes and adds a bit more variety or depth in areas that I prefer more, then that would be super interesting to me.
I think the other thing that I love about this game before we move on is just that oftentimes I feel that sometimes cozy or cute games can get a little bit, I don't know, sometimes I think the theme can be too heavily laid on thick, where it's doing too much of the heavy lifting, and it's almost like they're doing a disservice to cozy gamers or people who like cuter themes and thinking that like, no, you can't have much crunch in those games. They just have to be cute. I feel about this game like I felt like A Place for All My Books, which was that there is puzzliness in it. It's a cute dynamic. It's really, I mean, A Place for All My Books is more multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah.
This one kind of feels a little like that because it is relatively low player interaction.
It feels very Pokemon-y.
It does.
Yeah.
But because there's a central map, there's a little bit more player interaction in this one, I think just slightly than A Place for All My Books. But I really appreciate when cute or cozy themes still have respect for the intelligence of the players and don't just assume that if someone wants a cute or non-violent or, more chill theme or even multiplayer solitaire, that they don't want a crunchy puzzle. Like it's just had a lot of respect, I think, for someone who might want to play a cozier game. And I really, really appreciated that.
Awesome.
All right, next
that was
up.
Wondrous Creatures. Okay, so the next game up is one of the games that we've been hinting to, and that is Fetching Feathers. Now, I think, Madeline, you can probably do a better job of teaching this than me, because you're the one that kind of taught it to me, and then we've taught it a few times since, and let's keep this concise. Do you think you can explain the core mechanic here?
Yes, it is conceptually a little bit weird to grasp, but I think it's pretty simple. So at the core, there are bird cards and location cards. Everybody starts with the same 3 location cards, and each of those location cards have 2 sides to them. So they have an orange side and as in like 2 halves to them. Orange and blue, and then also each of those locations have resource icons on them. So meat, fish, and vegetation, right? Vegetables.
And they're going to have different resources depending on whether they're orange or blue. So at the top of the card, it might be blue and have meat on it, but at the bottom of the card, it might be orange but have like
vegetables on it.
Yeah.
So everyone starts with the same 3 types of location cards. And then on each location card, you have 2 different places where you can put birds on either side. Now, some of those birds can have flocks, so they might be able to have a little set collection going on, but some of them want to be alone. And then they have their own individual scores, and they sometimes like to be with other birds or score extra at certain times of day. Now, the kicker with this is that I mentioned there's 2 different halves. There's blue and there's orange, right? So you randomly start with one side up, and then after you've picked and passed and played all of your birds and set them all down and organized them, between rounds, everything changes. So the orientation changes and those birds might migrate. So you not only have to think about, are those birds in the right location for the resources they need to be able to be placed now, and also am I considering the future of what they need at a future location.
So you score the first round, they flip, and now the birds that you have are going to have to move, and you might not even have space for them. So you're going to need locations that can now support those birds, and or expanding your flock with the cards that you get in the second round.
So the pick and pass element is that at the start of each round, and there are 3 rounds, you have always 2 location cards in the starting hand, and 5, 6, and 7 birds. It gets more and more and more. So like it's getting more crowded in here. And so you have to decide also, do I want to prioritize the collection of birds I'm doing, or is that effort going to take my location that I want? And like, you really have to
you've got to decide, do I want to be safe and make sure that the birds that I want to keep can stay, or do I want to take this really appealing bird that can score a lot of points in my tableau? But there's one other mechanic that you didn't mention that I think is a really cool twist, which is I can look over at Madeline's tableau, at least the cards from the previous round, and see them laid out and be like, Madeline can't support this bird, so I'm just going to leave it for now, and I could keep passing it, and at the end of the day, she might be forced to take it or choose to take it, and then not be able to play it. And if she can't play it, at the end of the round, once everyone is locked in, you pass those cards around just one time if you're in a larger group. And if you can play the card that was just passed to you, you get to play it into your tableau at the end.
You can't move anything, but you can get that little extra bonus.
And so that's a really cool twist to like push your luck onto like, I don't think Madeline can play this card, so I'm going to take the other cards before she takes them. And then if she can't play them, she could have taken resources that I don't know about. But if she can't play them, then I get that card for free at the end.
Do you know, we've talked about this a few different times about, we tend to say that we don't like push your luck games.
Yeah.
I think that what I can say now with maybe more nuance, thank you, is I don't like when I'm pushing my luck against the game as much as when I'm pushing my luck against the players around me. Maybe the exception being Moon Colony Bloodbath, because I think that in that game, that's just the core of the game. But I don't like push your luck games. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Flip 7. I'm so sorry.
It's more... I think what you're describing is it's more when push your luck is multifaceted. Like, if it's the core mechanic or if your strategy hinges on that, I think it can be diminishing because it takes away from your skill, your thought, your preparation. Whereas in this game, it's a viable strategy. It's not like what you have to do, or it's not like the only option.
Yeah. I think that personally, I love consideration. And I know that we often talk about being considerate as like a kind thing to do, but I mean consideration as in, this is why I like complexity, because I like when there's a lot of things to consider. I think my brain is very happy, and it's pretty, I think it's a strength to be able to consider many moving parts. And so I like games that the consideration can also include knowing the players around you, anticipating what someone else might be doing. And that doesn't mean necessarily like I like or do not like player interaction. It's more I like the player interaction that enables you or empowers you to be considerate about others. I don't like player interaction where the sole point of player interaction or the person I'm playing with, but that's less about the game, is like hate drafting or like withholding or causing damage, or like that's not really my thing. But when you get to consider, and I think this is something you've really turned me on to around like considering and playing with other people's intelligences, like I feel really good when I'm doing that. And this is a small game. This is a very relatively low light game, and yet it holds a lot of that inside of it.
I think it says a lot when the only thing that frustrates me about this game is in the middle of the game, you're kind of supposed to rotate the cards around, and then like they all get a bit messed up. You have to got to tie them. It's a bit finicky. You can just choose to just mentally all like agree that you're now on the orange side, but like that is the thing that annoys me about this game. Everything else, top notch. The art is beautiful. The mechanics are really satisfying. The point scoring, it takes a minute, but it's like quite straightforward. There's a lot of depth to this. I really like how you are introducing one of the biggest challenges yourself by giving yourselves birds early game. When you can see what the resources you're going to have next round, you're giving yourself a future challenge by like, I can score a lot of points now, but that's going to make it harder for me next round. And that might be harder and I have to make hard decisions. Or there might be that I am risking that the first two resources I get has one of the resources that I need in the next round on one of the landmark cards. So yeah, a lot of love for this game. This is going to be one of those ones that we carry around in our bag for like cafes or for...
And I love showing it to people.
Yeah, we showed it to my cousin and he loved it too.
Immediately bought it.
Yeah, immediately bought it.
Influence!
Awesome. So that is Fetching Feathers.
All right, next up is a game that we don't physically have, but we played because we went to Leeds Board Game Convention. We actually just got back from it. And so...
Not technically a board game.
Not technically a board game, but I think we need to mention it, which is Blood on the Clock Tower. So we just played our first game of Blood on the Clock Tower. We played it with a bunch of people. Well, only a couple of people had played it before. 2 people, I think. The rest of us were newbies, and shout out to Brandon, who did an amazing job as a storyteller for us. But we had really good fun, and I wanted to include that in my top 5 list because I'm trying to explore into tabletop RPGs as well as just like, you know, generally in RPGs.
Like less guided games.
Yeah, it's more... You know, whether I'm talking about solo quest and like trying to play more solo games and finding that the setup of a board game solo feels really different than potentially a journaling solo RPG, or I'm just trying to broaden my horizons a lot more in this space and figure out, you know, what I like to do communally, what I like to do independently. And with Blood on the Clock Tower, I usually hate social deduction games. And I think that social deduction, any game that has a high social aspect, whether it is like Moon Colony Bloodbath or something else that has interaction with different players, Deep Regrets being another one, which we did that video on as well, who you play with really, really, really matters. And so I know that any sort of social deduction or RPG-like game requires intimacy and knowledge of the players around you sometimes and feeling safe enough to have fun. But I really enjoyed Blood on the Clock Tower for a number of reasons. One, the storytelling was amazing. Yeah. It was really fun. It was clever. Also, I really enjoyed the people I played with. So in Blood on the Clock Tower, we played the bass, which, do you remember the name of what the bass play is?
I don't.
Yeah, sorry. But we played with the base characters, the most simple story. And there are goodies and baddies, and then there are some confusing characters. And each person has either a role or a dynamic, or something will happen if a person does something to this person. And it was really, really good fun. So
it just narrowly escaped my top 5. Very fun.
So I don't know that there's much more to say about it beyond just if you have the opportunity to play Blood on the Clock Tower, I would really recommend you give it a go, especially if the crew of people you're familiar with. I think the other thing is we were invited a few different times to play Blood on the Clock Tower. Thank you, Max. I think I felt a little bit nervous about it because I felt anxious to play with people who had already played. And I think the other thing that was really lovely about this was that aside from 2 of the players who had not played it many times, but maybe watched a lot of content on it, most of the people didn't really know much about how to play. And so we were all kind of fumbling through together and figuring out how to do things. So yeah, it was a yes for me, and it was one of my top 5 game experiences. I think because it was just so fun.
It's the kind of thing where I wish I could invest in the board game so we could play it, but like it requires a storyteller as well. I walked away feeling bummed that this isn't an experience that we can easily replicate because it requires the people that you're around, it requires the game, which apparently is expensive, it requires someone who's willing to be like the chaperone for the game or the storyteller.
Yes.
And so it's a bit like playing tabletop RPGs. So I think it was a good comparison in that it's just it's such a special experience if you have the opportunity to play with people you like.
Yeah.
That it's definitely, I'm so glad that we have it on this list, because if you get the opportunity to play with people you like, not just people you like, but like people who like you know and feel comfortable with, it is such a great experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So next up is Ollie's number 5 and my number 3.
Yes. Thief's Market. So I'll do a very brief introduction in this. At the start of the game, you are rolling a bunch of dice into the table, and there's a very simple premise in this game, which is you can take as much as you like, and then it's the next player's turn, and they can take as much as they like, including from you. So they can take either what you've taken or as much as they like from the middle. And so the core mechanic in this game is you're trying to take just enough to do what you need without looking too appealing to anyone else.
Yeah.
And like that core mechanic alone, it really snapped for me and I really liked it.
If you steal from someone else, so if there's like 16 dice, right? If someone took 15 dice and you took what they had, you would then have to roll one back in. So also you have to make sure that it's enticing enough, and if you think it is going to get stolen, that you've also taken enough dice that every time someone changes and takes it and they roll one in, they won't disrupt it so that it can come back. It's so strategic.
Yeah, so just like what you were talking about earlier, this is the kind of like push your luck where you're pushing your luck against the players around the table.
Yes.
And you're leveraging like how much you know about them, about their risk tolerance, the kind of strategy they like to go for, what cards they already have like from the heist. And so, so we probably haven't spoken about the heist much in terms of the game.
Yes.
But you're then using the dice that you rolled and the resources that you have available to you to purchase parts of the heist. Now,
so there's 3 different rows in the marketplace. One of them is the market, one of them is the heist, and one of them are relics.
Yes.
So in the first round, it's just the market. So most of those cards are, you pay the dice, the cost of the dice, which have gems sometimes on them or wilds or whatever, in order to buy these cards. And those cards allow you to change one thing into another thing, or get points for something, or change another thing into a random, or blah, blah, blah. They allow you to transform your resources. So at the beginning, you're kind of starting to play this long strategy of balancing out what you can do within your chain, because you can only ever do many of them once. Then in the second round, the heist opens up, and these start to get more expensive in cost and value, or more also ranging in cost and value. And those ones are also more powerful. And then the relics open, and ultimately the game ends when someone has 3 relics, and those are usually end game scoring points, or they are immediately on acquisition scoring. And so you could play a really good game just constantly getting dice that have points on them, and then just being like, I'm just going to take points, I'm just going to take points, I'm just going to take points. Or you could be playing these like long-term like chaining strategies, and someone could take the card because nothing gets refreshed either. And so the first player market is part of the marker is part of the loot that you can take, and you can buy as many cards as you want, and the marketplace is not refreshed. And so we had a couple of rounds where like you and I swept the like top market, and then everyone else was just stuck with the gems they had, and you don't get anything from that.
Well, with that said, though, this is the kind of game where you probably want to play a couple of practice rounds first, because the first time we played, but someone then got 2 relics before we even realized what was happening, because didn't know what to pay attention to, what kind of risks to take. And so like it's one of those games where I imagine, we learned by experience, you can feel like a bit of a bummer when you're like, oh, well, I'm kind of like, it's hard to come back from this.
I am realizing I just freaking love a dice game. I love dice.
Well, this is
dice placement.
this is Madeline to a T. This is action chaining plus dice rolling.
So true.
Because like I thought it was engine building at first, but like the cards that you're buying from the market are like you can turn one green into either a red or blue or white. You can turn like one white into a money bag. And so Madeline was doing like, I've got this one dice, I'm going to turn it into this thing, then this thing, then this thing, and this dice is going to transfer over there, and then that dice gives me money, and then the money can.
I was like, buckle up, boys.
I literally at one point I was like, everyone, this is complicated. I need you to focus so you know I'm not cheating.
Yeah, it does feel that way.
Yeah.
But no, this game was great. We originally didn't get it, even though the hype for it, I think, started a little while ago because it was all over UKGE because the minimum player count was 3.
Yes.
That makes me so sad because it means that we're not going to get a ton of plays in. But there is a human in our circle who I think is really going to like this game, our local cafe owner.
Oh, yes. I didn't
and
even
so
think
I'm
about
going
that.
to see if I can bait him into playing it with us a lot. But the person who ultimately won this game actually was someone who didn't focus on the relic game, but got a lot of cards that transform things into points. So I really liked how not only was it about what you could get from the marketplace, but the person who won kind of like kept to himself and just kept changing things into points in his own private tableau, whereas everyone else was so focused on the relics.
And it wasn't the person who triggered the end of the game with the 3 relics,
Yeah, it was amazing. So so we had a really really good game with this. I can't wait to play it again, although it may be a little bit of time before we're able to do that just because of the player count.
Awesome. Okay, so up next is, we've used this box a couple of times now, Dune Imperium. Now, this isn't actually the Uprising. We still have not played the Uprising variant just yet, but I've been playing Dune Imperium digitally over the past month. And I might have technically mentioned it in my previous month, but it was at the very end of July, and so I'm counting it for this month as I've been playing it a lot. So Dune Imperium is a worker placement deck building game, and deck building is probably my favorite single mechanic to have in a board game, and we've been in a worker placement craze over the past 6 to 8 weeks, and so these two mechanics just combined into the form of Dune Uprising and dominated my own solo play experience. Yeah, so in Dune Imperium Uprising, it's very thematic if you know the Dune universe. You are taking on the role of a faction leader, such as Paul Atreides, and you are placing workers across the board to upgrade your deck, to gain soldiers to send out into the desert, and to increase resources and standing with other factions such as the Fremen or the Spacing Guild, for example.
What are the witches? The
Bene Gesserit.
Yes, Bene Gesserit.
Yes. And so there's one other that I actually don't recognize because I haven't read the books myself. And so it's very thematic on theme, and it has just the right amount of deck building and strategy. There's a bit more combat. And so I wasn't sure if Madeline would like this game.
I feel about this game as Ollie feels about Wondrous Creatures.
Yes, and so I introduced this game to Madeline, and she was, nah. And then I walked away, and she sent me a video to edit.
Okay, listen.
She sent me a video to edit.
Yeah, in the video, I may have been baiting that I played the game by myself without Oliver. And in that video, I kind of spoke about why I don't like this game. As much as I think he wants me to, and it has more to do with the 2-player experience.
Yeah.
So in the 2-player experience, there's also an AI, and the AI is just arbitrary and annoying. Either I want there to be an AI that is either consistent enough or logical enough that I understand. So for example, in Trinket Trove, I know people have mixed opinions on it at 2-player, but the AI doesn't bother me that much in Trinket Trove because you always know what he's going to do. The AI in this game just felt so arbitrary and stupid to me. And it just, because of the fact that there is limited stuff you can do, it just felt like it just always felt like it arbitrarily screwed with what we were doing for no good reason. And I find that games that require a lot of cognizance of your opponent's moves and it's high player interaction, AI just ruins it for me. I either want to be completely playing against AI, which then is exercising my muscle and adaptability, or I want to be completely playing against other people, because then I can get to know the person as well, which is part of the strategy. But that mixed one person's AI and one person's... I'm like, no.
Yeah, this game is specifically balanced for 3 and 4 players. So no matter how you play, there's going to have to be at least 3 entities, 3 teams. And so that is one downside, and I agree.
Yeah.
A part of the reason why this worked for me is that I was playing digitally, and so I was playing with like 2 AI bots.
2 AI I think I would do.
Yeah.
Well, which I did, and that's how I clarified. But yeah, we enjoy this game. We enjoy this game.
Yeah. Strong game. I don't have too many more comments, to be honest. I kind of want to record a separate video on this, but I want to play it with like 3 human players before we do that. And so we'll
3 humans. Hi, are you a human? we're recruiting 3 humans.
and so we'll be returning to that. I'm also curious how the Uprising expansion can work. This is a standalone expansion, so it's its own game that you can buy by itself, but it is largely building on top of Dune Imperium as the base game.
We have a Wednesday local in our local pub board game cafe pop-up.
Yeah.
That's probably a game that we would bring with to people who we know would be down to play.
Awesome. That's Dune Imperium. We have 2 more games, and they are both the same for us. We share the number 1 spot and the number 2 spot.
In the same exact order. So our
Yes.
number 2s are both the same and our number 1s are both the same rather than it being inverted.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you talk about the number 2. However, I'm going to let you finish, bud. No, I'm going to let you talk about the number 2 and you're allowed to be the one to introduce it. I will say I'm very, very, very surprised that the number 1 was your number 1. So that's why I'll be talking about that one.
Yes,
but
okay.
first, let's start with this.
So we spoke earlier about Tin and Og being the number 1 pick that we walked away from like UKGE with, and that we got to walk home, play with, and we've had in our collection. My number 1 game, including games that we couldn't get a hold of at the time, was Drillers. Now, we've had this game for almost a week now. Came last week.
Gosh, has it only been a week?
Yeah. And so we've played this at 2 and at 4 players. And this is a deck building resource management game. In it, you're controlling your mechs, and there are adorable minis here, like
Did you just use the word adorable for Drillers?
It's hard not to when they're so
Hard
vibrant.
disagree.
Really cool miniatures, dude. I'm editing that out.
No, you're not. All right, so the miniatures.
Adorable. With these mech diggers, you are going down into an abandoned mine and reopening tunnels to gain resources such as gems and opening up corridors. You're then trying to get back up to the surface so that you can sell those gems for money. And with that money, you can buy cards to upgrade your deck. And so there's this like really cool like loop where you're trying to build up the capabilities of your mech so that you have more movement, more fuel capacity, more drill ability, where you can hold more gems at any given time. And so there's a lot of upgrading of your own mech and capabilities in this game. So if you like an upgrade track in a game like I do, this is going to be the game for you. If you like deck building, this is an awesome game. And after playing this at 2 players, I was blown away, especially given how tired we were. It really clicked for me after like the first like full round of gameplay. I love all of the individual mechanics together. It took a little bit of time, but like I really, really enjoyed it at 2. Now, the caveat I'm going to add, which I think Madeline's going to talk more about, is we then played this at 4 players, and it definitely degraded a bit for me because it's the kind of game where there's a lot of like thinking and balancing decisions, especially if you manage to have a successful turn where you go down to dig and get back up to the surface, then you have to decide on like what upgrade you're going for. And so there's a lot of decision making, which I think it's just enough that it doesn't hurt too much in a 2-player game, especially as you get to know the cards and the kind of viable strategies. And so that's where it started to flag for me. But aside from that, this was shaping up to be such a tight game for me.
Yeah. I just want to be a little bit more precise with what fell down at 4 players because I don't actually think it fell down because we were playing at a 4-player count.
Okay.
Why it fell down for me, one is I think the game got very long, but that was just because there were new players at the table. And this says that it's 30 minutes per player, so it would have been a 2-hour game total. I think that that's fairly accurate. It also just depends on how much respect and mutuality you have for optimizing on a turn, because it really is. This game is such a tight resource management game. If you're playing it well, you will be coming to surface with no fuel, or 1 fuel left. And that means that you're really optimizing choosing to stay in the mines, because if you stay in the mines, you don't get to do an entire part of your turn, which is surfacing, which is selling things and buying cards and what have you. But you can also stay deeper longer and potentially push and drill into it further.
One feature that I didn't mention is action economy, which is what Madeline's touching on. If you like action economy, this is the game for you, and that's what really drags out this game a bit.
So when one person is drilling, it depends on what they're doing, but one of the drill effects is opening up new corridors or floors. And when you're opening new corridors, you end up releasing gems that if you do not have enough drill to drill the corridor and then also pick up the gems, you could leave that for another player. So that brings me to the second part of why I think this fell down, and it had nothing to do with 4 players. was that you had 2 people at the table who knew the game, and this was their second play, which was the 2 of us. And then you had 2 people at the game where this was their first play. And so as a result, you have people who, when they're learning, are drilling and releasing gems. And then you have Henry Hoover over here, who's coming up. No, it was actually me. I was the one hoovering up.
The amount of sapphires you had, wow.
Yeah, and I think that once you know the game, you get a feel for how you could be benefiting other players in a way that would be detrimental to your game.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily that you're actively, like, you're not hate drafting or like actively withholding, but you kind of are actively withholding, but you are thinking about, if I only have 5 drill and it's going to take 4 drill in order for me to release that corridor, and it's going to put like 3 rubies down there, then, and I can only take 1 of them with my final drill. Do I really want to give that advantage to another player that's sitting in that corridor right now?
That dovetails nicely into something that I also want to talk about that I didn't touch on earlier, which is the scoring. I really like the scoring in this game. When we were playing with the 2 new players at Leeds Board Game Convention, one of them mentioned, I'm really surprised you're not scoring based on some of the cards that you're adding to your deck. And that's what I really like. So the scoring in this game both feels satisfying and very thematically appropriate. You're scoring based on 2 things and 2 things only. One is the gems that you've collected and sold along the way, and they score at different amounts depending on the rarity of the gem, because that's the main objective of what you're doing down in the mines. The second thing is that you're scoring based on how you have expanded the capabilities of the mine, which is drilling down to open up new levels or drilling out to open up new corridors. And so both of them require a lot of resources and drill and capability of a mech to drill. And so it's rewarding you for opening up like new spaces, even if that's releasing gems for other people. And so there are some big scoring opportunities.
And actually, there is technically one more way you can score, which is just extra coins, which you use to buy things. But without that caveat, the thing I also really like about the gem game is gems, the rarity between them is actually less drastic for points than it is for money. So the difference between a more common gem like a sapphire and the most premium gem, which is a ruby, is only 2 victory points per gem. And so I think at some point, if you're just pushing for rubies because you keep thinking that, well, a ruby sells for 10, whereas a sapphire sells for 6 or something like this, then it makes sense that you're prioritizing rubies early game. But then it's hard because early game, the rubies are only in the floors that are typically not open. So you kind of have to be perceptive in this game and understanding which things are going to have higher yield depending on how you're trying to manipulate them. And so both times when I have won, it's because I've gone aggressively for like a middling gem. And I didn't focus so much on the shiny things.
I won the first game, and it was only by 2 points. The reason why it seemed like you won both games was Madeline, based on like gems, based on like the visible scoring, like for the most part, like it looked like you had such a big lead. But I completed one of the objectives in the game. The only objective along the top, which is by basically opening up corridors. The more you open up corridors, the more you dig down, you like fill up a bar, and if you fill up the bar all the way, you get this big token of points at the very end. And I got that right at the end, which boosted my score by like 23 points, I think it was, and then won by 3. And so I was like 20 points behind. And
it's a really well balanced game. It's a really well balanced game.
And so like this is not a full review. We've shared quite a lot of our thoughts because it's so raw in our brain, and we have like strong feelings about it because like it has a lot that we like about this game, but we're going to have to play it a few more times before we do a full video. A full video will be coming because of like how close this is to my interests.
Absolutely true. The final thing I will say is art style for me, you will catch me several times saying that this is an ugly game. I just can't stop myself. It's funny. From an art style perspective, it does not appeal for me. Is it objectively a excellent execution of the art style it's going for? Yes. And the mechanics behind this game are fantastic. I would have preferred probably if it was a cute mole burying in the earth and like finding little treasures.
It is a well executed game. If you like the box art and the box cover, it is consistent throughout, and the components are very good. Like the quality of components.
I feel like the game is going to cut so many people off visually because I would, if I saw this, I wouldn't pick it up, but I really liked it.
In terms of those tertiary things, the quality of the art, the box, and whatever, the only thing that really annoys me is the insert, but that's outside the scope of this video.
That's beyond scope. All right.
So that is Drillers, both of our number 2 picks.
So finally, we have the game, the myth, the legend, our number 1, mutually shared, and we have baited it a lot in this video.
And another one that has sat on our shelf of shame for Evidently
Too long.
Too long.
And that is Tend.
Yeah.
So very fortunately, I found Tend after the Kickstarter campaign was long gone. I was going in to buy Scales of Fate and Pillars of Fate from Ivy Studio. And I ended up seeing Tend and was like, oh my God, this is so much more my art style than Ollie's, which is very Veiled Fate universe.
Yeah.
And so I ended up picking this up. And I think because of that, it was kind of a last minute decision. It was a little bit less expensive at the time as well. And it was a last minute decision to execute it, add to basket kind of vibes. And so that's why it sat. Because I think for quite some time, we didn't know what it was. Then we knew what it was. And we were like, oh, we don't know how we feel about roll and rights or flip and rights.
Or the roll we played, like they often tended to drag a little bit towards the end, at least for me.
And be understimulating.
And they were only like 25, 30-minute games. But this one is supposed to be like a 60 to 90-minute game. So it's like, if we're really going to sit down for all of that and we're not sure how we feel about roll and rights, it was a big ask.
This is a very chunky box. What I will say is, there are mostly dice in it and pads of paper.
Yeah.
So let me explain a little bit about what's going on in Tend. So Tend is a giant flip and write game. And so even though there are dice, it's not actually roll and write. It is a flip and write action chaining type game. The main thing, you have 3 different pieces of paper. You have your farm, or like central area where you're tending and doing things. Then you have your manifest and awards and achievements you're trying to go for. And then you have a little scratch off card, and that has your the woods and the mine. And so every single round, and there are 12 rounds, you are going to be choosing from a row of 5 actions. You choose 2 actions. And in the beginning, like most games where action chaining is building up over time, you're going to have probably quite short turns. But over time, you can really start leveraging like really long action chains. So this allows me to do that, and then that allows me to do that, and then that gives me that, right? That's what the action chaining vibe is all about. So Tend is a beautiful action chaining game that is very thorough in its ability for comeback energy. Yeah. So because they have been very wise, and obviously this has gone through a lot of playtesting and development, there were very few times when I was like, there's just no way for me to get that resource. Yeah. So the lack of stuckness that happens in this game meant that you could just have these really satisfying action chain turns.
Yeah. I'd love to just explain a few things and address some of the incorrect like understandings or assumptions that I had when I was like before we played this game versus after, before we go too much further. The first one is, there's a lot of paper in this box. There's the paper sheets, there's the scratch-off cards, and so it feels like a very temporary game there. Once you go through those consumable parts, you then have nothing but dice, and like you can't play it. However, they have put in a lot of work into some digital aids, like a digital scratch-off card or a digital player sheet, that like make it so much more confident for me that we're going to be playing this even after we run out of resources. Never mind the fact that I think they do sell like booster packs.
They do.
Yes. And so, but it's really nice to me that they have those digital aids to make it so that you can continue playing this after you've like expended the limited like physical resource that you have. The second thing is that I have some opinions around how I like solo play in games and like the kind of solo experiences I like. In Tend, what I found to be super interesting is that they bring in another thing that I'm used to having in video games, which is a seed. Now, a seed is like a pseudo-random number to generate a set of configuration. And the way they do this is that they give you a digital tool that will replicate the drawing of and flipping of cards, so that the only thing you really need for the box is your player sheet and the dice. This means that you can then play with a set of settings that is the same as someone else, and you can beat their high score while playing solo. So what this effectively does is it recreates all of the same decisions that they had during their solo play for you. So you're still playing solo, but you get the satisfaction of, I'm not just playing against myself for no good reason, or I'm not just playing against an arbitrary number. I'm playing against other people's high scores, or I'm playing against this really challenging mode that someone found based on the kind of cards that came up then. And so I really like that it adds a bit more depth and interest and excitement to a solo play experience.
Yeah, this game definitely fits squarely in the category of multiplayer solitaire. Yeah. And what that means is that you're not actively interacting very much with the other player. There's one small feature of this game, which is your neighbor card. So on either side of you, you're always going to have a card of an item where if you get it and you don't want to use it yourself or sell it off, you can choose to give it to a neighbor. And as long as it's depicted on that card, and as a result, you can get a different reward bonus, which was a really delightful mechanic, but still very low player interaction. Yeah. So this is definitely multiplayer solitaire. But it is a great, calming game to play. I've played it solo and I played it with you as well, obviously. And both experiences felt relatively similar. I did a longer video on that, and where I kind of break down the differences between the two and what I felt was better or worse and what I prefer. The other thing I want to mention about Tend is actually that we both ended up using the same word when we described the experiential feeling and sensation about this game, which is that we both felt very capable. And I think that this is part of why I like action chaining. I also find that board games for me are a part of my rest journey and a part of my, it's a form of active rest. So for most of my life, when we talk about things like you need to give yourself permission to rest or you need to rest more, I had this like image of rest being like sitting on the couch doing nothing, or like being able to just like go for a walk and be okay with that. And I find that for me, what is actually restful are things that keep my mind engaged and potentially are lower stakes and can help me to feel something. So there's usually an active feeling I'm trying to create. And this feels like a really restorative game for me because it is intellectually stimulating. I'm making decisions. I'm feeling capable. And by the end of it, I feel quite like processed. There's almost a little bit of like life processing as well that can happen when you feel, I don't know, when I feel maybe more helpless in my life, this is a game that can give me a little taste of what I'm trying to go for, maybe beyond the cardboard box, and give me a little bit more strength to face the challenges of my day-to-day life, which I think is some of the beauty of tabletop gaming.
Yeah, so like sometimes I find myself like wanting to have moments of connection with you. Like I want to play, but I find it so hard to pick out a game because I'm like, well, I don't want to be doing all of the admin of like setting up that game and managing the scoring of that game, or I don't want the player interaction of that game. It feels a bit too aggressive right now for my current mood, or like I like that game. It's not the vibe right now. Like it's not always like something that I can describe into words. However, this game, like it scratches the itch of play for me and connection, and that we can sit down at the same table playing by the same rules with the same configuration at the same time, put music on in the background, and yeah, we can choose how much of the other parts of that connection we want, whether we want to talk, just be by ourselves, listen to our own audiobook. And it's like, you might say that about other solitaire games, but it's because of how long you're playing and the kind of puzzly nature you're doing, like you can kind of play without really communicating anything aside from, are you ready to continue?
Yeah.
Like, are you ready to flip the next cards?
This is going to be a like very heady way of describing things, but I actually think it's important to have this conversation. So within the board game space, I think there are some people who would say that games like this, multiplayer solitaire, are like waste of space and there's like no point in playing a multiplayer solitaire game. I work really hard on combating ableism, which is like a big word to be throwing out in a board game video. But one example of how ableism can show up in our worlds is, for example, assuming that the best form of communication is via language than via nonverbal communication. And for some people who are not as much of a verbal communicator, that's extremely ableist, right? It's this hierarchical thing that we do with different types, and rather than seeing it as a broad spectrum. What I really appreciated about what you just shared is that for me, having a game like this in our collection helps me to combat sometimes the internal and external pressure I feel for a certain type of experience and togetherness at being postured as better than something else. And that doesn't mean that like I can't, I might find some multiplayer solitaire games to just be not complex enough, but for me, I agree with you. This has all the crunchiness and puzzly nature and stimulation as a more high player interaction game might. Only it vibes for me when I'm in more of a parallel play mood. When being together, it's less important for me to be social or loud or more overt in a player interaction kind of way. Yeah. And yet still we can really enjoy time together. And so I think that it's really important to have a range of different things for myself, because it's allowed me to really accept being in different modes and making space for myself and feeling like there are games for every occasion and every form of connection that we really want to have together.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why a lot of this applies here when other like games that I've described as being like multiplayer solitaire don't quite have that same vibe to me. And I think it's actually the depth of strategy here whilst also having the same game that we play. And so whilst after maybe the first turn, like there's only something small that we've done, by the time you're like halfway through the game, you have very different setups, even though you've been working with the exact same options, exact same resources, and each turn the exact same cards are turning over for your availability. And so it opens up like interesting opportunities to talk about like how you're solving something or like what
it definitely leaves you open to show and tell vibes.
Yeah, you
of
show
like,
and
watch
tell.
me do it, watch me do it.
I mentioned this earlier, I think, in the video. Like there was one point in time I'm like, I actually want to stop my turn and wait for you to finish so that I can show you because I feel like I'm cheating because of the kind of combo that I've just set up.
That's actually so accurate.
Yeah.
It's you know, this game is really, really powerful in our collection, and I'm hoping we find more games like it. To me, this is even better fit for me than A Place for All My Books is, even though I feel similarly about A Place for All. I felt similarly when I first got introduced to A Place for All My Books. Still love that game, still really appreciate that game, and the style of the afternoon and the experience was really similar to A Place for All My Books. On that day, we were in our hoodies, it was winter, and we ended up just kind of having cups of tea and taking breaks and walking away and coming back, and this game was really similar. It was just a really lovely way to spend an afternoon together while enjoying ourselves and getting some active rest in our own internal world. I think that if this is strategic internalizing, games like Dune Imperium are strategic externalizing. And sometimes I'm just feeling more internal, and this is a game that's perfect for that time.
Awesome. So that was Tend. So next month, I think things are going to look a little bit different for us. We're going to be spending some time apart, and so I
make it sound like we're literally getting a divorce.
Yeah, no. We've done a few videos on that.
We're spending some time apart.
We're spending some time apart, different countries, and so I think we're going to be playing a lot more solo games, and so that's going to have an interesting twist on next month. We're definitely going to be getting things like Dwarves of Aquilon to the table, and there are going to be some games here that we're probably going to be playing some more of. But yeah, so next month is going to look very different for us. Going to still have a good selection of games.
Also, I'm really excited because I'm going to the States not for Gen Con. I wish I was going to Gen Con, but I am going to the States around Gen Con. And so I'm really pumped for some of the overflow of what happens in the weeks after any sort of convention where there's availability. So my suitcase will be quite full, I think.
We saw that at UKGE. There were some sellers, like, both games that we really liked. There were some sellers that were like, I have run out of stock and it's only like halfway through Saturday. There were other games that we really liked and they were like, I got a bit too much stock and I've got to find places to put it. So they were looking to like move through it. And so it'd be really cool to see like a lot more of that in the US and getting hold of games that like just launched.
So I hope you enjoyed this video. We both hope you enjoyed this video. We try to be nuanced and experiential in what we talk about, but of course all of these are just our own experiences. We'd love to hear about your experiences too, so drop a comment.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, then I really would appreciate you clicking that button because we do this regularly and would love to have you around.
Thanks so much for hanging with us, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, bye.